Good evening. This December the 17th, 2024 Board of Aldermen meeting is hereby called to order. I'd like to ask Alderman Earhart to lead us in invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, which I will lead. Please stand.
Thank you, Mayor. Let us pray. Most gracious God and our Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for this time of the year, a time that we can reflect on the past year, hope for the year to come, and give great rejoice for the hope of our future. Lord, thank you for blessing the city, blessing the citizens within. I pray that everything we do tonight would be honorable and pleasing to you. And as we approach this Christmas season, Lord, again, I just thank you for the forgiveness of sins and for all your many blessings. These things we thank you in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Be seated. Ms. Stewart, would you conduct our roll call?
Aldridge. Collins. Here. Dickerson. Here. Earhart.
Here.
Hamilton. Henderson. Wallace.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. Everybody present except Alderwoman Hamilton. We do have a quorum established. Just as a reminder for those of us with microphones, please have the microphone on green when you're speaking so that you can be heard and understood in the audience. And also remember those that come forward as well as those of us here in the front that this is recorded live, or excuse me, streamed live on YouTube and also recorded on YouTube for playback at a later date. Board, you have two separate sets of minutes. First one we'll take will be the special call board meeting of December the 3rd, special call board meeting of December the 3rd, which was noticed to talk about convenience store gas stations in depth before it was brought to the agenda today as well for public comments. But is any changes to those minutes recommended or any approval motions for those minutes? Mr. Wallace, motion to approve. Thank you. Is there a second? Second, Ms. Aldridge. Any discussion on the minutes of December the 3rd? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next is the set of minutes from our regular meeting also on December the 3rd. You've had those through the weekend. Any questions or motions on these minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Mr. Earhart, motion to approve. Is there a second? Second, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Henderson. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Mayor's update, just a couple of brief items, and then I think we have a resident that would like to make a brief presentation. But board, you'll see some information, if you haven't already, on our social media site related to a community gardens project. We're looking this spring to open an opportunity to our residents to do some community gardening on land that we have within the city that the city owns. We're looking to have an opportunity to do that. It's going to be part of the land that's over at the 38 acres by the soccer fields, to where we're going to zone that out and plat it out to where people can come in, and we're going to allow them to do some community gardens under the leadership of a team or a committee of people that would head that up from a volunteer situation to give that a try for people that may not have the land. They might not live where they have enough land to do a community garden. They may not know much about gardening, but we've got a master gardener and some other people involved in that as well that are going to work with us and try to establish our first community gardens this spring. So you'll see some information about that posted on social media. Also provided items are approved tonight. I may be a little bit premature, but provided the contract's approved tonight, tethered hot air balloon flights will be available tethered for the next 2 weekends, this weekend and next weekend, at the Light Garden show. It'll be tethered or roped, chained down, however you like to say it, over by the dog bark, so that kids can go up on the balloon rides, et cetera, look out over the Light Garden and see that from hopefully a pretty unique standpoint. So we talked about hot air balloon rides this spring and a festival. Hopefully this is a good precursor for that, and I'm not trying to get too far ahead of the game, but if that works out, should be a pretty neat experience for our residents, those two items.
So, Mayor, if they're tethered, that means nobody can get hijacked to Kansas?
Can't get hijacked to Kansas. Can't get hijacked. And nobody gets to be up there the night the fireworks go off on New Year's Eve. I volunteer. I wanted to see the fireworks up close and personal, but I think we probably better keep the balloon on the ground that night. So just hopefully a fun thing in the middle of all the business minutia that we deal with. And I believe Mr. Berkeley has something. Mr. Darrell Berkeley, you have information you'd like to share with us. Feel free to come to the microphone or the lectern.
For those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Darrell Berkeley, and I reside at 6557 Renee Drive in Olive Branch. And my purpose here tonight is to publicly recognize the City of Olive Branch's Public Works Department under the leadership of Cole Feschmeyer. As I think sometimes Mr. Feschmeyer sees me in his sleep, because I've been continually finding work for them to do. But I have yet to bring a issue to their attention that they have not handled, and oftentimes understaffed. And when you have as much road surface as they have in Olive Branch, that potholes alone is a monumental task. And it's water leaks or whatever the case may be, but they have never failed to address an issue that I have brought to their attention. And I would just like to publicly recognize them. One thing about it, City of Olive Branch is blessed to have one of the best public works departments in the state, and we're all fortunate to have them. But that pretty much wraps it up. All I needed to do was publicly recognize them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berkeley. Also, I'd like to just have Cole stand briefly. I know that the board's aware that he's accepted a position as a vice president of the Mississippi 811 agency or service, and we wish him the very best with that. His last day is January the 3rd. Cole spent 20 years with the city and 12 years as a public works director. We appreciate your service very much, and I know we have an opportunity maybe next week or week after to get together with you in a more informal setting, and wish you the best. But hats off to Cole and Public Works for a job well done. Thank you. Yes, sir. Moving along on the consent agenda, you have items 1 through 22. 1 through 22, board. Any questions or any comments on those items or any motions?
I make a motion to approve consent agenda.
Mr. Collins, motion to approve. Is there a second? Second, Ms. Henderson. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. I know we always want to maintain protocol in these meetings and maintain professionalism, but I understand from the bailiff in the back there is a special guest tonight that wanted to come in very briefly and visit. So let's go ahead and bring that guest in, if you will, Officer Pulley. Well, it is that time of the year, isn't it?
How are you doing, Santa?
Wow, wow, wow.
I just want to come by and wish y'all a Merry Christmas.
Well, thank you, Santa.
I was just checking to see who's on the mayor's naughty list, and who's good and who's not.
I think they're being good, Santa. They're being good.
How you doing, sir? Merry
I
Christmas.
promise to be good until Christmas Eve.
Yes, sir. How you been? Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas.
I'm looking in the mirror.
Thank you, Santa. Thank you, Santa.
How you, sir? How you? You have no clue.
They all really know who you are.
It's gonna blow your mind when I tell you.
Everybody said, "Oh my gosh!" So we're gonna check your naughty list, Santa. But
I gotta put it on for this time of year, you know? Okay, I
We-
ain't gonna disturb y'all
well,
no
thank you.
more. I just wanted to wish you a Merry Christmas.
well, thank you very much. That's your mentor.
Yes, you do. You can be my elf, huh? Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. We'd hate to break protocol, but it is the season. Thank you, Santa.
Y'all have a Merry Christmas.
Yes, sir. You too. Okay, back to business. Thank you, Officer Pulley. If there's anybody else out there, give me a text first. Thank you. Public hearing, Planning Commission, old business. This is a public hearing date for consideration of application to amend the project text for the preserve at Cedar Bluff Plan Development, submitted by Mr. Jeffrey King, managing member of Meridian Premier Homes. The request is to reduce the minimum square footage of 28 townhomes planned to be built in the townhouses of the preserve at Cedar Bluff PH1 subdivision from 2,000 square foot to 1,800 square foot. The 28 townhome lots comprise approximately 2.4 plus or minus acres located along the Chalet Drive and Mayflower Street within the R3 Planned Residential Zoning District. Public hearing date was set for this on November the 19th. Is there a staff report?
Yes, sir. So this probably looks familiar to the aldermen. There was a previous application, and it was proposed to reduce the minimum heated square foot requirement for 66 townhomes in the Preserve at Cedar Bluff project from 2,000 square feet to 1,800 square feet. And although that had received a unanimous recommendation for approval by the Planning Commission, it was denied by the mayor and board at the October 17th meeting. And so this new application is similar, but it's been downsized. It no longer entails 66 units. It's just 28 townhome units, and those are in 7 4-unit buildings. And again, the request is to downsize the minimum requirement for the heated square feet from 2,000 down to 1,800. The 7 4-unit buildings are on 28 of 32 platted lots in the townhouses of the Preserve at Cedar Bluff Phase 1 subdivision. And it's about 2.5 acres in total, and that's the area that you can see with the red dashed line around it, this being the aerial map and this being the master plan. And it's only 7 or 28 of 7 4-unit buildings on 28 of the 32 lots, because one of the buildings, the one that's already under construction, does meet the 2,000 square foot minimum living square foot size. Just to give you a little bit of history on this planned development, the board approved the Cedar Bluff project text and master plan about 4.5 years ago, back in July of 2020. And prior to that plan development, you can see the master plan on the screen being approved. This property had 2 zoning designations on it. It had about 5.5 acres of the 41 acres was designated for R4, which allows there to be apartment units at 15 units per acre. And then the balance of that property had a designation of AR, which is 1 unit per acre. So where the maximum 116 units came in was, we basically did the math and we said, well, the property is currently entitled under the old zoning to be able to develop 116 units. So we asked the developer to come up with a new plan that would redistribute those 116 units in a better way. And that's the origins of that master plan. So you have on the western side of that, you have the single family area. These are 50 single family lots, and those are all on public streets. And then over on the eastern side of the project, you have the 66 townhome units, and those are behind gates. One of the issues that was discussed back when this rezoning occurred in 2020 was we didn't want to have the cross-through traffic. So behind those gates in this townhouse part of the project, these are all private streets located behind there. And when you get into this project text, It contains all of the development standards for both the single-family home part as well as the townhouse part. So it talks about minimum square footage of the units, setbacks, minimum sizes for lots, those types of things are all contained in the project text. And what you have before you tonight is a very simple strike through and underline on the project text, which would change the minimum townhouse size on those 28 lots from 2,000 to 1,800 square feet. Go over a little bit of history on this project, a little more history on the project. We've had subdivision plats for both of the single-family phases. Again, in the western part of the project were approved and recorded in 22 and 23, and we currently have 29 of the 50 lots over there have single-family homes on them. The subdivision plat for the first townhouse phase, and that was for 32 lots with 8 4-unit buildings, was recorded in March of 2023. We have approved a preliminary plat to finish out this townhouse part of the project, but you can see the roads and infrastructure have not yet been built for that to be able to move forward to the final plat. So one thing I want to clarify is what is a townhouse? And it's the same thing basically as a single-family lot, except it's an attached unit. So you can see, for example, you have a single-family home here, and you can see the lot lines go around the single-family home. And what these black boxes show are what the townhouse building would be like. And so it's the same, again, as a single-family home. You own a particular piece of land, a front and backyard, but the property line or lot line runs down the shared building wall. So a lot of times in development, we hear people around here say, well, this is a 0 lot line development, and there might be, quarter-acre lots or something. That's not 0 lot line. This is actually 0 lot line. What that means is you have 0 setback at the lot line, which is the shared wall between the various units. And it's really the lot width here that determines the width of your various units. So I had mentioned earlier that we already have one building under construction, and this shows you a picture of that building under construction, and the location of it. And you can see the 4 units. You can see the 4 garage doors fronting out there. And again, this building has been designed and permitted to have at least 2,000 heated square feet in this building. So the amendment was not necessary to be able to get this first building built. This shows you a comparison of what was approved back in the 2020 master plan, currently on the books. That's in this center location, and then to the right of that shows you what's proposed, the floor plans. So what's unchanged between the two, the width of the units, again, that's 25 feet, and that's determined based on the width of those lots. As a matter of fact, the proposed building's just a foot or two wider overall, because I think he made those end units a little bit wider on the end, but basically the width of the buildings is the same. The 2-car garage is still included in both the existing plan and the proposed plan. You have a 75% brick requirement, stays the same, not proposed to change. And really the basic floor plan between the two is the same. It's a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, and you've got a flex space or bonus room over top of the garage. This is the first floor, this is the second level plans. So what's changed, really he took most of that 200 square feet from the second level. He has staggered the front of the buildings, and I don't know if you remember, we had a 2023 amendment where we talked about pushing those buildings back a little bit with a greater setback to make sure that the cars wouldn't park, if a car was parked in the driveway, wouldn't block the sidewalk. And so by staggering those buildings, I think that helps a little bit in that regard, gives them a couple of extra feet at least on those center units to be able to have a little more room to park a car in front of the garage door. Some people may consider the staggered building a more interesting or an improved streetscape view. And one thing I did note too is on his original plans, he had a 9-foot ceiling down and 8-foot ceilings on the second level, and he has increased that by a foot to 10, 4, and 9 feet on the upper level. So even though the square footage is shrinking a little bit, the amount of, I guess if you did a cubic foot measurement, it would probably be a little bit greater in size. And what's one of the issues that came up at the planning commission meeting is why is the developer doing this? Why does he want to build a smaller unit? Because from a builder's standpoint, the larger the unit, the more profit generally they would make. And the reason that was explained by Mr. King, and I'm sure he'll get into that again tonight, was why he was doing this was because he was trying to add amenities to the project, because these would be in townhouse units that would be for sale. He's trying to amenitize the project by adding a dog park and a pickleball court. And then also the fact that we have private roads here, you're gonna have slightly higher homeowners association dues or fees to maintain the common grounds and to maintain these amenities in the private streets. So his idea was he could charge a little bit less for the unit by having smaller square footage, but make up for it and charge a little bit more in the homeowners association dues, and it would basically be a wash on the consumers that he's targeting for his project. One of the things that the planning commission said was they understood that argument, but they said, well, you need to provide us with the plans for these amenities, and that's what you see up on your screen. This is the dog park. It's kind of located between your single-family area and the townhome area, and the pickleball courts, which are located in the middle of your townhouse area. And so he did provide those plans, and the planning commission also said, well, if you're going to do that, we want to make sure that those amenities are front-loaded on the project. We don't want to have the project done and then add the amenities, and so they added a condition in there that they would complete those amenities by the third townhouse building built in the project. So possible justification to approve this would be that the plan better meets the market demand, and I think that's something that Mr. King can explain. And again, lower purchase price of the units to offset the higher homeowners association dues, and that's due to the fact it's got private streets in it, they're gated. You have those amenities that I discussed, and then you have a lot of common green spaces to maintain. And there is a need in our comprehensive plan to diversify our housing options. We do promote townhomes as a medium density product versus high density apartments. And one of the reasons we do promote that in the comp plan is it does provide a means to ownership. And then finally, the abutting homes in the Chateau Ridge development are about 1,000 to 1,500 square feet. And so even though these townhomes would be downsized from 2,000 to 1,800 living square feet, they would still be larger than the surrounding property. So you can see that was reflected in our Planning Commission recommendation. They did review the application at their November 12th meeting, and by unanimous margin, they did find that the proposed amendment does not adversely affect the character of the area because the downsized townhome units appear to be indistinguishable from the slightly larger ones that were originally planned, and they are still larger than the abutting homes to the south, that a public need is being met by facilitating the development of a medium-density housing option promoted in our comp plan and currently lacking in the marketplace, and adding amenities is deemed to be desirable. So they did pass the motion recommending approval for 28 of the 32 townhome lots, that they be reduced from 2,000 to 1,800, and then they did add that provision in there that to ensure construction in a timely manner, that the pickleball courts and dog park would be substantially completed prior to certificate of occupancy being issued for any of the units in the third townhome building. And that completes the staff report.
Any questions on the staff report from the board?
Mr. Gambone, I wanted to ask, what's the total acreage of the project?
Well, the total acreage of the entire preserve at Cedar Bluffs, this entire area is 41 acres. So if you just took the area that we're talking about changing tonight, which is over here on these lots, it's about 2.5 acres total.
So this meets our medium density requirements of 9 to 15 dwellings per acre?
Oh, actually, the overall project, it's 116 units on 41 acres, so we're actually less than 3 units per acre.
Right.
So overall density of this whole development is extremely low. There's a lot of green, I mean, you can see it, I think, in the master plan, you can see how much green space there is, and that's not even counting the yards of the single-family lots. So you have a substantial amount of green space in the project, and again, less than 3 units per acre overall.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the staff report? Anything else from the applicant to add at this point? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Jeff King, 9186 Highway 4 West, Senatobia. Mayor, Board, thank you very much for the opportunity to present this to you again and for your consideration. Again, I think it is a fairly simple request. What we're really talking about is this isn't a one-way request. This is a two-way request. We're trying to request a smaller square footage, as we've talked about, in exchange for amenities. And the real goal behind this is because as we looked at this and researched it and gone out, and things have actually changed over the last 3 years since this has been almost 40, since this was originally approved. Been a lot of impetus and interest in amenities, specifically pickleball courts, dog parks, and that's kind of the whole theme behind the preserve at Cedar Bluff, was to make better use of all the green space. It's, we're attracting the same financial demographic either way. We aren't changing the buyer, we're changing what the community looks like. The total house payment inclusive of the HOA for the 2,000 square foot model would be about $2,300 a month. For the 1,800 square foot model, $2,300 a month. It's the same price because lower house payment, higher HOA. With the amenities that we're adding, we're increasing, the HOA fee to cover that. So you're attracting the same buyer. It's not changing that. Secondly, we, Meridian, we manage HOAs. We've been very good at it. And all of the HOAs that we manage, we have never been let go, I guess, thus far, knock on wood. We manage the Glen at Plantation, which is in Olive Branch. It's a community very much like this one. It's got amenities, it's gated, and I think most of you have probably heard very little about it because it doesn't have crime and it doesn't have issues and it's not a nuisance. We also manage Duval Hills and a number of other places. So, we would maintain the management of the HOA. That said, after, like any other project, after it's complete, the homeowners have the right to pick anybody they want. But generally, if the HOA company does a good job, and we intend to do so, we continue to do that. Because I know that's a concern, that the HOA might, go defunct or something like that, and then the project goes down. But honestly, that's a concern with anything we do. I mean, it's all about getting the right homeowners, the right people in the community, and having them like what they are paying for, and thus, we want to bring amenities to this. Frankly, in my opinion, a plain Jane set of townhomes with nothing going for it, outside of a gated community, is not the same as a place that's vibrant and has, fun things to do. As mentioned last time, we surveyed everybody that we've sold a house to in phase 1. And we told them about this project, the potential impact, and the fact that, there was the houses were going to be smaller, but there'd be amenities. These are amenities that the single phase will also share in. They will be allowed to use the dog park. They'll be allowed to use the pickleball courts. And 100% of the people we surveyed, every single person in there that answered the door, there was only 2 people, I think, that did not answer the door, were for it. So the very people inside of the community that this affects the most were all unanimously for it. We then went right around and hit the kind of edges of the community, and we were able to knock on 10 other doors around the edges. 5 people answered, 100% of those people. So every single person that answered the door signed a petition and said, yes, we want this. And so, there may be people here that support it, and they'll come up after me. There may be some opposition, but you have 23 people that would be here tonight standing in a line saying, this is what we want in our community. I also want to add that, in the beginning, the 2,000 square feet was not something that the board asked us to do. It was something, in my research at the time, I put on the application. It wasn't a mandate or anything. As I've looked since, I've found very few. In fact, the only community I've seen that's had a 2,000-foot townhome in it has been in Collierville, and its minimum is actually lower than 2,000 square feet. So this would be probably the only one that I know of around anywhere that would have a 2,000 square foot minimum. I'm not shooting to try to build nothing but 1,800 square foot homes. I want the option to build an 1,800 square foot home. We went to our architect and we asked them to, help us design this so that we could snap. Think of it, you have a quad, and somebody comes up, says, I want a 2,400 square foot townhome. The next person wants an 1,800 square foot townhome. Two people want a 2,000 square foot townhome. We can snap those all into the same footprint and build them. So we want the option to be able to carry people up or downstream, in size as needed. And, with the market the way it is right now, interest rates high, sales are tough. I mean, I'm sure you've heard this, we need to make the most attractive project we can. And frankly, I feel like, and I think, down deep, I think most people feel like something with a bunch of amenities would be far more attractive than something without. That's really all I had to add. I know I've spoken last time at length, and I don't want to burn it.
Thank you, Mr. King. Any questions of the applicant?
Mr. King, I do have one question.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that the residents in the single-family homes will be able to go use the pickleball court. How will they access the pickleball court? Will they have something to get through the gate, or have they got something they have to walk through?
They'll be able to park on their side and walk through the gate will not be, the gates are for the cars, they're not for people, right? So the gates will not continue. There'll be a walk-through gate on the sides.
Okay, all right.
Any other questions?
I assume it would be like a coded gate where they punch a code to get in, I suppose. To keep just anybody from walking through.
Yeah, well, right now our goal is to have the drive-through gate be a coded gate, but not have the walk-through gates be a coded gate. So our goal isn't necessarily to keep it, so that nobody can walk in, and because on the same token, you've got the people from the townhouse side that are going to try to get in. Now, I mean, let me back up. The south side, where it's Chateau Ridge, that'll be solid, you'll only have that. But on where the two communities connect, our plan as it currently sits is to basically have it, a gate that people can freely walk through.
Any other questions?
Yeah. I think you said it, but when will you start the pickleball courts if this is approved?
Immediately.
And after, I'm looking at your units here. You said
Three quads. So we have started the first quad, which is 2,000 square feet.
quads.
And then we'll potentially start one or two more. By the time that third quad is complete, we have to, we will not be approved for anything else until the pickleball court and the dog park's
I
complete.
guess the quads are numbered, because it looks like one of them has a lot of housing in it, right?
Can you bring up the,
I mean, I'm looking at that back there.
just show all the different
Looks like
quads?
one has 15 in it, or 10.
Yeah, this is a great, all the black boxes are essentially, on this picture, a quad. And so the one, Jason will highlight the one that
So
we're
what I'm
currently
looking at here
There you go.
doesn't show those spaces, just shows them all lined together. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That one does, but this one didn't. Preliminary development plan. But it's gonna be like the front page, right? What you're showing there.
I
on
can't,
the screen,
I can't see
I
what
guess.
you-
Yeah, see,
Yeah.
I'm looking at this right here, and this one is different.
Yeah,
This is preliminary development plan. It shows them all in a row, like
the,
10 or 12.
there was a design originally, again, I can't see that far to see what you're looking at, but what Jason's showing here, it is the actual parcel and the current set of quads. The ones that are on a row, you can see at the very bottom in red.
So they all will be in quadra 4, right?
Yeah, Each box is basically
That's
4
there it is
units.
right there. Well, look out, we got 3, 6, 9, 10, 12.
I guess, Mr. King, what, essentially,
got 4.
what separates a quad? So if you have 12 units in a row, what separates those 3 quads?
So we're only allowed a quad,
I
and then
guess it is,
basically
huh?
you're gonna have open space. I'm not sure what the setback is.
Is it gonna be a
between-
walk-through there?
Yeah, it'll be a walkthrough, so you can go around the end of either quad and walk
Yeah.
through to the back. And then
All
the
right,
same
I see.
thing, between
I
every
see a little
quad,
bit
there's a
right
walking
there.
area.
So each building has 4 units in it, the way that
So-
his plan is designed. He's got, I believe it's 4,
I can see a little bit of walk.
yeah, he's got
So you
15
count- you
4-unit
count
buildings and 2
after
3-unit
3 of
buildings.
them.
Yeah, all the amenities will be done conclusively with the third quad when we finish the crib. My goal is to have them done right away.
3,
I mean,
4, and 3 of,
2 more, we have one going right now.
yeah,
We'll be starting 2 more, and by the time those 3 are all complete, the
okay.
amenities will be done.
And Mr. Gambone, what were you saying about the setbacks between the houses?
Well, the setbacks are between the buildings. I'd have to check what it says in the plan development. I want to say it's 15 feet between
That's-
buildings. Did you have, yeah, I think that the plan that Alderman Collins is looking at probably was at a scale that you couldn't really see the building footprints versus the lot lines, but they're 4-unit buildings. It's just like this picture. So you can see you've got the 4 garages, and then in between and on the ends, you've got the entryway to each of the units. But there's 4 units in a building, and then we're talking about the living square footage, which excludes the garage space, the heated square footage in each of those units. So it's 4 units per building. The overall plan has got 15 4-unit buildings and 2 3-unit buildings. So there's not 8 or 12 in a row. It's all 4 units. They're just like, again, the property line runs right through the center of the shared wall between the 4 units.
Mr. King, I had another question too. So obviously,
He should have the pickleball courts going.
and I'm not a builder, so on a concrete
Yes.
pad, if you wanted a minimum of 1,800, 2,000, 2,400 square feet, you made a comment earlier, if someone comes up in the market and says, I'd really like to have 2,200 square feet, or 2,300 for whatever, are your pads capable, you don't have to build a minimum, but you can kind of customize a unit per se to someone's
It
specifications?
would be, in that case, build to suit. So we can't start any unit until we have 4 sales.
Right.
Right, or 4 specs. So once we get them, we'll have the plans and we'll know that, oh, this one's longer, and we'll pour a larger slab, smaller slab, larger slab, smaller slab. So we basically pour the slabs once we get the design and we know what everybody's purchasing.
So if the market or the desire were to change, and let me ask you this, so could a quad have 2 1800s if that were to pass and 2 2200 square feet?
Absolutely, yeah, I mean, we can't go any wider with them,
Right.
but we can go deeper with them, and, I mean, it's conceivable we could put a 2,800 square foot townhome here if somebody wanted it, so it's, the idea is, once we get a quad worth of sales or enough sales that we want, then we'll build the last one as a spec, and pour it out, and that's what we'll do. But quad has to be built all at once.
Right, okay.
It
Any
creates
other
a little more
questions
risk.
of the applicant? Thank you, Mr. King.
Thank you.
This being a public hearing, is there anyone here that would like to speak on behalf, you would like these, you're a proponent of this, you'd like to speak on behalf of this application? If so, please come forward, give the clerk your name and address if you'd like to speak on behalf of this application.
It's actually 30 feet.
Seeing none, is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? Before the board goes to a vote, and Mr. King may want to rebut or have some responses to this, I want to point out a couple things. One, Meridian is a reputable home builder. Mr. King and Mr. Burns are reputable. I covered that last time. But I do want the board to consider 5 different things. One, this is the first townhomes ever approved in the history of this 151-year-old city. 4 years ago, they were approved, and before any of them ever got built, a request has already been made to reduce the square footage of them. Secondly, not only was the request made to reduce the square footage of the townhouses, 16 of the single-family homes were requested. Y'all approved them at 2,200 square feet, and then approval was given when the request was made when the applicant came back before the board for 2,000 square foot, so those 16 have been reduced. There's a reason stated that 2,000 square foot townhomes are more marketable than, 1,800 square foot townhomes are more marketable than 2,000, and I'm just not sure how we know that. I know it was approved 4 years ago. There was a slab of concrete that's set for about a year, and now as of our meeting after October, 4 have started being built. But I'm not so sure how we could say that 2,000 square foot townhomes will not sell if there's never been any on the market for this city anyway. And then also, reason stated is that the amenities are going to be pickleball court and a dog park. At one point, the Planning Commission was advised the fees for the HOA would be $400 a month. I don't know if that's still the case or not. I'll let Mr. King respond to that. But if that's the case, we have some subdivisions in this city that have $1 million and above homes that their HOA fees are less than half of that. They're $2,400 a year. So to get $4,800 a year to be adjacent to Highway 78, I know it's a good, starts down a good path, but I still feel like that as soon as that HOA gets 51%, 2/3, whatever it's required to change that, trust me, it's going to change. People are not going to pay $4,800 a year for a pickleball court that y'all will know when it goes into effect, especially the aldermen in that ward, because we'll be getting phone calls saying, Mayor, I work at night, I got to sleep during the daytime. What's all this pop, pop, pop? Because guess what? It's not taking place in a park. It's in a subdivision. It's in a subdivision. And then lastly, it's been stated that this is adjacent to Chateau Ridge, and those homes are 1,000 to 1,500 square foot, and this would be a plus. True, that's on the south. What's not mentioned is to the west, homes are 3,000 to 5,000 square feet, and it's a disservice to those citizens that have those houses that have lived in them for years to allow lower and lower square footage to take place. If we call this developer or any developer back in after the board approves something and you said, Mr. Developer, I want you to increase the square footage by 200, 300, 400, you know what that developer would say? Board, that's unfair. You approved it at this amount. Well, guess what? That works both ways. So unless the board's ready to hear applicants over and over, every time there's an increase in borrowing money, interest increases, construction cost increases, a downturn in the economy, get ready, because guess what? You'll have that request again to downsize. We didn't ask for these to be 2,000 square footage. That's what was presented to the board 4.5 years ago. It was approved, and just want you to consider that before you take your vote. Any questions by the board?
Mr. King, do you have any response to that as to how the $400 HOA fees were derived? Are they sustainable? Would you care to comment?
Sure.
I'm happy to address all the points that the mayor brought up. With respect to the HOA fees, the Glennet Plantation is a 61-unit condo complex. It is virtually the same as this, almost the same size, same setup. There are quads there, single story, not two-story, gated complex. The HOA fees started there at $260 a month. Now, it doesn't just pay for the amenities. It pays for the pickleball, there's a pool, there's a clubhouse. We cut all the land, do all the landscaping. We take care of, so it's, when you move into there or to this subdivision, you're not lifting a mower, you're not dealing with landscaping, we've got to handle all the gates. You also have to remember it's a private subdivision, which means that the homeowners have to handle all of the asphalt, everything in there. So there's a substantial expense when you build a private subdivision as opposed to a public one. So basically, we think there's going to be about a $75 to $100 difference between the HOA fees that a 2,000 square foot homeowner would have to pay without the pickleball courts and the maintenance and everything else, and what an 1,800 square foot homeowner would have to pay if we added those extra amenities. And that's kind of offset with the mortgage payment. So again, we're not we're not targeting any more or less dollars. Again, this is a $2,300 a month payment. You know, it's based on about $180 per square foot sale, and a couple $100 in HOA fees. So, I mean, it's not inexpensive. So I'd like to address a few things. The mayor brought up the fact that, you know, if the board came and said, hey, we want to raise the square footage on something, we'd be upset. I'm not asking that. What I'm asking is I would like to give something and I would like to get something. Now, if the board came up and said, we'd like you to build it a little larger, but we're going to take this expense away and we're going to take that expense away, I think that would be a discussion. Okay, just like we're having right now. I'm asking to take something away, but I'm providing something in return, and my hope is that you see the value in that as I do. Mayor brought up that you know, we had asked for this last time, and we got 16 units in phase one. You may recall it's during a very, very bleak time. Interest rates were going crazy. Sales were nuts. I came in and just basically asked for some help. I said, look, it looks like sales are going to be down, and we'd really like to try this. We got 16 units approved. We only built 5 of them smaller than the original. We went from, we had been approved for 2,200. We asked to go down to 2,000. We were approved on 16 lots. We've only built 5. We've built, in fact, on the other lots, we've built 2,400 square foot homes, 2,600 square foot homes. We've built larger. So again, this is an option. It's trying to create an outlet so that we can, A, hit a demographic that, you know, wants these amenities more than anything else. This isn't trying to build something small and not give something back. There was one other point that I can't remember, Mayor, that you brought up.
I don't know.
Okay, so that's any other questions?
Mr. King, let me ask you something. Yeah, and I spoke to you before about it. You know, the only problem I have with it, it's like you said, we granted you some lower square footage on the houses, and the mayor kind of brought it up too, is you hadn't tried to build any of the condos. And they're just not, because I rode through the neighborhood and I see you're 4 up. Why don't you, I would almost be more, if you was trying to do half and half or something, just like you just said. But like I think Mr. Earhart asked if you could build one larger, and I don't think you can once you start this. They're all going to be the same size.
Yeah,
and that's why I don't know why at least you would compromise and try some of them larger. Yeah, and, you know, instead of just asking for all of them, go small. We had you and I talked about it. We had a planning commission meeting and had a lot of people here. You know, it wasn't the easiest thing to get past to start with. Mm-hmm. And I just hate to change something before it even tried.
No, I respect that.
And you know, it's nothing against you. I mean, we did change the housing, but to just change these, and you hadn't put, I guess they're on the market. You probably got them on the market even though they're not competed, but I don't know why you wouldn't try to see if they sell or do something different, you know.
Yeah, well, respectively, this is a compromise. Originally, when we came in here, we asked for all 66 units to be 1,800 square feet. We went ahead and started building 4 2,000 square foot units, and now the request is not 66, it's 28. It's less than half. So that is all we're asking for is
so
phase
you're only
one.
asking for half of them?
We're asking for half of them, yes. Phase 2 is not being considered right now. This is just for phase 1. And again, like you mentioned, when we build a quad, we got to know what we're building, and we'd like to get some.
That's what I'm saying. So, all right, how many quads will you have at 2,000? I mean, I'm not very smart.
1 quad at 2,000, and the rest of there will be. Let's do it in unit. 1 quad's 4 units, so then we'll have another 28 units, which will be 7 other quads. That could be anything from 1,800 square feet, if you approve it, to as large as a client wants to buy. So it's not an 18. It's essentially what people want to buy. Now, I will build the next quad at 1,800 square feet because it'll be a spec. So I'm going to build one more. I have a 2,000 square foot unit. If this is approved, I'll build an 1,800 square foot unit. The 2,000 is going to be my model homes, so I'm going to have those set up as models. And then, you know, I'll have some that I can sell, the next set, and then we'll see, you know, where the market takes us. That's what I'm requesting.
Why wouldn't you commit to building, say, half of them bigger? Yeah, I mean, it's not what you're saying, though. Right?
What I'm saying is there's two phases. The first phase, I'm looking, you know, I believe the amenities, what I'm trying to do here is fund the amenities. And in doing, the only way I can fund the amenities is, and maintain what I'm trying to do, is to lower the square footage. If I keep the square footage up and I add amenities, now I've just turned it into a $2,500 dollar mortgage payment. How many people here have a $2,500 mortgage payment and live in a 2,000 square foot house?
Art.
Zero, right?
Art,
So it
you
gets
opened up
very
a can of
difficult.
worms, because you said the amenities, the housing part are gonna be able to join it?
The housing part, excuse me, sir?
The housing. Didn't you mention that they were gonna be able to join and maybe use the pickleball courts?
Yes, on the housing side.
Yes, that's
they'll
what I'm
be able
saying,
to-
they're gonna be able to do?
They will have, and they'll be able to freely use the dog park. They will have to pay a fee to use the pickleball courts because the gated areas, the ones that actually have to, you know, they're maintaining it. So they'll have to pay a small maintenance fee and opt in should they want to use the pickleball courts. They should, you know, because
And the dog-
they're in a separate HOA. The single-family home's a separate HOA than the private.
And the dog park is outside the gated community.
The dog park's outside the gate, yes.
Well, all these homes that you've done, these subdivisions, they're all extremely nice and tucked in.
Thank you,
And I love what you did to the rental up on our Goodman.
thank you.
And it was years ago, and someone on our board lived there. And you came in and you made them look like brand new apartments, and they're so nice. I
Thank
just commend everything you've done for them.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
They all are nice, and you did what you said you were going to do.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other questions of the applicant? Thank you, Mr. King. Public comments are hereby closed at this time. Any questions or motions from the board or any discussion?
Mayor, I'd like to, I guess, make a comment, and I'll tender a motion. In the previous meeting, when Mr. King was turned down, I supported that motion at that point because I don't think he's honestly going to build 66 or 28 or whatever's approved, 1,800 square feet carte blanche. And based on my motion last time and the planning commission this time supporting it 5-0, I'll still support my motion to approve 28 of these townhomes to be available at 1,800 square foot minimum. So that's my motion.
Got a motion, got a second. Roll call, please.
Aldridge. Collins.
No.
Dickerson.
Yes.
Earhart.
Yes.
Henderson. Wallace.
Motion carries 4-2, approved to reduce the requested minimum 1,800 square foot. Thank you to the
And that's
applicant.
on
Thank you for
that's
those
on-
who gave input.
28 of the 66 lots, correct?
Well, that's what was proposed, 28 of the 66. That's, y'all approved what was proposed. Right, no change of what was proposed, 28 of the 66. Yep, that's it. Thank you, sir. Following the agenda, next item would be, this is a public hearing date for consideration of proposed ordinance to amend the zoning code to require conditional use permits for convenience stores and fuel pumps and truck stops in specified conventional and planned zoning districts, establishing associated locational criteria and design specifications, and to adopt provisions to vest projects from the requirement to obtain a conditional use permit. This hearing was set on November the 19th, 2024. Staff report, please.
Yes, sir, thank you. Go back to start the presentation. You all had adopted an ordinance on November 15th of 2022 that made convenience stores with fuel pumps conditional uses in our conventional zoning districts of C1, C2, and C3 in our industrial districts. If you go back prior to that date, all of those uses, C-stores were basically permitted by right in commercial zones and industrial zoning districts. And then in our plan developments prior to November 15th of 2022, they were permitted as approved in the project text. Like the project we just looked at has a project text, and it lists uses that are permitted or conditional within the bounds of that project text. So C-stores were basically allowed across the board by right in all of our commercial and most of our planned districts. And back before November 15th of 2022, we didn't really distinguish between any type of neighborhood scale commercial C-store or truck fueling centers or truck stops. So none of that was done. And you adopted an ordinance on November 15th of 2022 that made these C-stores with fuel pumps conditional uses in our conventional commercial zoning districts. That's C1, neighborhood commercial, C2, highway commercial, and C3 general commercial, and also in our light and heavy industrial districts. And truck stops were made conditional uses in C2, M1, and M2 zones. And what is a conditional use permit? That is something that is issued by our city's Board of Zoning Adjustment, and they have to go by certain criteria, and they include things like neighborhood character, public safety, the impact of the project on the environment, or its potential effect on property values. And that's done at a public hearing, again, in front of our Board of Zoning Adjustment. And also, when you adopted that ordinance back in 2022, you included the requirement that C-stores had to be at signalized intersections and that you could have no more than 2 at a 4-way signalized intersection. And that was based on the premise behind adopting those regulations to begin with, really public safety and traffic management. Now, when you go back to the 2022 ordinance, it did not include planned development districts. So basically what that means is that if you have a project text with a planned development, you're in C4 zone, M3 zone, or PUD zone, that if that project text said you could have a convenience store with fuel pumps, then you could have a convenience store with fuel pumps in there by right, and it was not subject to the requirement to obtain a conditional use permit, was not subject to the requirements that you had in that 2022 ordinance where at a signalized intersection or no more than 2 of the 4 quadrants of that intersection. So also, when we did that ordinance in 2022, it did not include provisions to address what I'll call C-store projects that were underway, and those are projects that had pending applications in for either subdivision or civil site and landscape plan review, building permits, or even those that were under construction. You know, when you develop something, you're starting with, and what we're talking about tonight is really the zoning level, and I always call it a zoning entitlement, not necessarily an approval, but it's, are you entitled to do that use in the zoning district? And that answer may be yes, no, or it might be yes, you can do it as a conditional use permit, but as you develop something, you have to go through a number of other steps in the development process. You have to have a platted lot, for example. As part of that subdivision or platting process, you provide infrastructure, you know, to that lot to be able to service it. You have to go through a process to get your civil site and landscape plans reviewed and have your architectural renderings approved, and that happens through our administrative processes, through our planning and our engineering departments. And then if you pass through that step, you also go through getting a building permit, and that's when we have our building official look at the building plans and our fire officials look at the building plans to make sure that they meet all of those life safety codes that are in the various building codes that the city's adopted. And then throughout the construction process, you have a period of they build to a certain level and then ask for an inspection from either our building or fire code officials, and they go in and inspect and make sure that they are in fact meeting the plans. So to go from a zoning entitlement to actually building construction, it can take many, many years and over a period of time. So those were two things when we were looking at our ordinances, when we adopted that 2022 ordinance that we really weren't including. We weren't really addressing the PDs, and we weren't including any provisions about projects that were already underway. So this is a map that shows you what our situation is with our convenience stores. We have 31 of them that are currently in the city, and that's the blue diamond that you see shows the location of the 31. But what I wanted to point out were the projects that were currently underway. We had 6 of them that signified by the green diamond, where the C-stores had gone through the processes that I had just mentioned and were currently under construction. We had 1 of them where we had the civil site and landscape plans approved by the planning and engineering departments, but they hadn't started construction. We had 5 additional ones, or have 5 additional ones. Actually, now there's a 6th where we have civil site plans that are under review, that are in process, that have already gone through some of the steps. And then we had 2 that actually had gone all the way to getting a building permit, but never started construction. So in total, you had 14 that I'll call projects that were in some form, underway at that time. Now a total of 15 with what we got in within the last week or 2. So of those 14, and now of the 15, 8 or 9 of them actually have zoning that were in planned developments, and that's what this map shows in all these purple areas. So those are planned developments where the 2022 ordinance was not applicable, that basically in those planned developments that, the use of convenience store with fuel pumps was something that was permitted under those planned developments. So they would not be subject, again, to 2 at the 4 corners of the intersection, or have to be at a signalized intersection, would not be subject to having to get a conditional use permit. In fact, we've only had 1 that attempted to get a conditional use permit, and they were denied. That was that racetrack project at Hacks Cross and Highway 302. We've had no other applications since 2022 for any conditional use permits. And so I'll go over one of the intersections to give you an example where we have planned developments at 4 corners. This is Pleasant Hill Road, and this is Church Road. So close up on the next screen of what's going on at that intersection. So just to give you an example, we have planned developments at all 4 quadrants of this intersection. So this is Marguerite Manor. This area is about 20 acres in size, and we currently have a convenience store at the corner, located right at the southeast corner of that intersection. But in that Marguerite Manor project text, you could have a C-store, another C-store. And I'm not saying anybody's proposing this, I'm just saying this in theory could happen. You could have any other C-store in any other place in that whole 20 acres. And if we go clockwise through, this is these 2 that are labeled as B are in Robinson Crossing. Now the Robinson Crossing planned development, that has the use of convenience store. It doesn't specifically mention fuel pumps in there, but I think that the owner of that project would argue that that would be something that they could do by right in either this area right at the southwest corner of that intersection, or even down here at Malone Road, even though this is in Church Road at an intersection that is unsignalized. And again, because that's in the project text, that would not be subject to any of those rules. They would not have to get a conditional use permit, or not have to be subject to the rules that are associated with that, like being limitation of 2 at the 4 or at a signalized intersection. This is about a 19-acre piece. This is in a different PD. This is the neighborhood at Bell Point. And in that PD, it's very clear that a convenience store with fuel pumps is permitted in that area. So again, would not be subject to any type of conditional use permit if no changes are made. And then here at this intersection, we do have, you can see the diamond there signifying that we do have plans under review for a convenience store at this northeast corner. But even in that PD, you could have another one in theory next door to it, because that's something that is, again, permitted in the PD. So if you don't make any changes tonight, that is a possible scenario that could happen. And so the ordinance that we're proposing does address some of those factors. And mainly it would make them conditional uses in those planned developments. and would require it to go through that Board of Zoning adjustment process and be subject to those conditional use permit criteria. We do, in the proposed ordinance, eliminate the use from the C5 zoning district, which is Old Town, so you would not have any new C-stores in the Old Town district. The proposed ordinance makes truck stops conditional uses in planned development districts, and it also maintains the signalized intersection requirement and the cap of no more than 2 at a 4-way intersection or 1 at a 3-way intersection. And one new thing that's introduced in this ordinance is we've created 3 different classifications of C-stores. The first one being a neighborhood scale C-store, which would have no more than 6 pumps or 12 fueling positions. That's the smallest classification. Second classification is one that would be larger than that or have truck fueling. And then the highest classification, or the one that's most impactful, would be a full-blown truck stop. The new ordinance does incorporate design regulations, and then finally, the ordinance also includes provisions to add C-store projects, those ones that are all underway, with pending applications for subdivision, civil site and landscape plan review, building permit and construction. So we've added some of those provisions to address that, to get those projects moving forward, or to be vested from the regulations. So this shows you a table that's been incorporated into the proposed ordinance. This deals with your, on the rows, it deals with your different types or classifications of C-stores. Again, this would be your neighborhood scale C-store, again, limited to 6 pumps, 12 fueling positions. It would have to be on a minimum size property of 1 acre. It would have to be at least 200 feet from residentially zoned property. It would have to be at least 200 feet from a daycare, school, public park, or public playground, and it would not necessarily be required to be on a designated truck route. And when I talk about the distance requirements, again, this is something that's not in the current ordinance. This is something that's being introduced to strengthen the regulations that we have, and that would be measured from basically the canopy of the fuel canopy or the C-store wall to the property line of the nearest zone property in one of these classifications, or one of the protected property classifications. When we get to our second tier, and this is the larger C-stores, or one that has truck fueling positions, you'd have a minimum size of 2 acres. You'd have to be 500 feet from residentially zoned property, 700 feet from daycare, school, public park, or public playground, and you would have to be either on a designated truck route, or you would have to be within a 1/4 mile with direct access to a truck route. And then when you get to a full-blown truck stop, you're looking at a site that would have to be a minimum of 4 acres in size, distance 800 feet from residential zone, 1,000 feet from the daycare, school, public park, or playground, and again, you'd be required to be on a truck route. So again, all of this is new. Current regulations don't have any of this in there, so the city's really moving to strengthen what our regulations are. Just go into a little more detail on the design requirements. We've added those in too. So again, this is something we don't necessarily have, but would be introduced in the new ordinance. You would have to have columns that would use the same exterior materials that would support the canopy of brick and natural stone as the principal building. The second one deals with canopy placement, and rather than it necessarily being at the front of the building as shown here, the fuel canopy, it would have to be either on the side of the building or in the rear of the building. And we did put some provisions in there to change those requirements in the event that you had a C-store that was part of a large grocery store or other large retail. It could be in this design where the canopy would be in front. And we've also given the BZA the ability to be able to waive that provision to avoid a situation where adherence to these provisions would be placing the canopy either closer to the residential area or causing a traffic problem. We have provisions in there that the monument signs could not be higher than 12 feet in height. You get 1 canopy sign per street frontage. So, for example, canopy sign could be there. Canopy sign could be on that side for the street frontage. And also, if it were to be a truck stop, we have new provisions that the Tractor-trailer parking would have to be enclosed with an 8-foot-high composite fence and have a 50-foot-wide landscape buffer around it. And then we've also added provisions that electrical charging would be recommended at a ratio of 1 charging station per 4 pumps. As far as the vesting provisions, and these are for the projects that are currently underway, again, this takes them through different points in the process that they would have to meet these timelines to be considered a vested project. And what vesting means is that they would not be subject to the rules and regulations that we just discussed. They would not have to get a conditional use permit and meet those design and locational criteria. You'd have to have a preliminary plat approved by June 30th of next year, final plat approved and recorded by September 30th of 25. You'd have to have your civil site and landscape plans approved by the end of next year, a building permit by March 31st of 2026, and you'd have 1 year to construct the building. It would need to be completed by March 31st of 2027. And there are provisions in there that if you do have an expired building permit or you have no building inspection that's been passed within 6 months, that you would have to double your building permit fees to be able to renew that. So we do have 2 ordinances here, the one that we're discussing, and then the next item on the agenda is to actually amend those 17 planned development project texts in all the different locations around town. And if this were to be approved, the effective date of the ordinance would be January 17th, or 1 month from tonight. Our Planning Commission did review this at its November 12th meeting and did pass a motion 4-1 to recommend approval of the ordinance. That concludes the staff presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Gambone, would this be one of the most restrictive ordinances in the state if this is approved tonight, as far as regulations required of placement of C-stores?
Well, I can't say for sure because, to be honest, I have not reviewed other regulations from the state, but I think that's probably a fair assumption. These are pretty strict regulations.
Okay. And a number of these C-stores may have been approved as high as 15 or 20 years, and even before the area was brought into the city of Olive Branch. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I was thinking about that this morning. I'll use like the plantation development as an example. That was approved by the Board of Supervisors back in the 90s, right before it was annexed into the city. So, when there's one of the C-stores that was showing as receiving a building permit that had expired right at the southeast corner of the intersection of Germantown Road and State Line Road, that's one that the Board of Aldermen never even really approved. You did not approve that plan development. It was something that was approved by the Board of Supervisors, and upon annexation, you inherited that. So that's one of the plan developments that's proposed to change tonight.
Gotcha. Is there another question?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Do we have any locations in Olive Branch that have an assumed right or a right of property that's already that way that this will affect?
Well, that's really the next item on the agenda, is amending those 17 project texts. And in many of those cases of those 17, you'll see that the amendment is, yes, they have a right, like I mentioned Marguerite Manor earlier, that when that C-store was built there in Marguerite Manor at the southeast corner of Pleasant Hill and Church, that did not require.
So we can't retroactively change their rights to their.
This is changed. This would be changing their zoning. That's your project text. That's amending all of the zoning on those.
We can't do that with other property.
But if I understand the recommendation correct, if they have permits already, if they're ready to go, they have a 2-year time frame to build out. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And
I think
if-
I misunderstood the question.
And then if they don't build out within 2 years, they
right.
have to start over again and fall under this conditional use permit.
That's the vesting provisions. So yes, they could still move forward under, if they were able to get the project vested and meet those provisions, they could still move forward and not be subject to these changes.
If we were to adopt this, couldn't we just do the same thing if it was say a housing development? Say if you don't start the development by such and such a date, you lose the right to develop the homes up? I mean, wouldn't it turn around and be?
The board always has authority to amend its ordinances and to adopt zoning ordinances to regulate the use of land. Now, if you have land that is currently being used in a way that is not consistent with the zoning ordinance, then it would be what's called a legal non-conforming use, which is Article 9 in your zoning ordinance.
Right.
That's part of what the board's considering amending tonight to include these vesting provisions, to give landowners who are in midstream, if you will, an opportunity to complete the project before the regulation would go into effect for that particular site.
And there's 17 of these?
No, so they're kind of two different things. There's some overlap between the 17, yes, but they're, you know, when we talk about the PDs, we're talking about it from a zoning level. So not all of those, these vesting provisions would apply to PDs, and they would also apply to regular C2 properties.
But not be an appearance of stripping someone's rights away?
No.
Okay.
Oh, no, sir, this is letting them know, you know, this is giving them the ability to finish the projects that are already in process.
On the other question, when you measure from the fuel canopy size to the property lines,
Yes, sir.
is there a distinction that says you gotta have a 12 by 12 canopy or whatever the pump location is, size, to keep somebody from, saying, building a 2 by 4 canopy just to get away from meeting the minimum? You see what I'm saying? If it's going, if you're 20 foot short, and you won't be able to build there because the canopy's too big, and then basically shrinking the canopy to the size of an umbrella, is there gonna be a minimum size to say, for, say, safety reasons, or whatever the case, to avoid somebody from manipulating the distance between the property lines?
Well, I don't think that would probably come into play. I mean, generally, and I don't know if it's an environmental regulation or just something that is standard now, but everyone, you know, covers their fuel, their pumps with a canopy.
You do see
So-
some, though, it's basically over the fuel pumps, and then you pull in some, it's like driving into a carport.
I think in this would also go from the edge of the building, so it wouldn't just necessarily be from the canopy, it could also be from the edge of the C-story building. So I suppose, you know, you could, in theory, manipulate your design to make sure that you met those distance requirements, but that's, I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We want somebody to design it so they stay farther away
To
from
make sure they're staying.
the residential. You know, in fact, we allow the BZA to not follow through and require the pumps to be on the side or the rear if in the event that that's gonna push it closer to the residential, because that's something we don't want. So so I think, you know, we do want them to design with these regulations in mind.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Other questions regarding the staff report, if there are any? Hearing none, this is a public comment item. If you're in favor of this proposed ordinance, if you're a proponent of it, please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Brett Morgan, Urban Insights, 7825 Tumbling Creek, Millington, Tennessee. I'm not really here tonight to argue the ordinance. My partner, Steve Steinbach, has been working with staff and city attorney on this, and the arguments regarding that had to do with the vesting mechanisms, and those have kind of been implemented. Steve could not be here tonight to do it himself, so he asked me if I would come forward and just thank this board, thank the planning department for its work in this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else would like to come forward as a proponent of this proposed ordinance? Seeing none, anyone would like to come forward in opposition? You oppose this particular ordinance that's been presented? Seeing and hearing none, public comments are hereby closed. Board, any questions or discussion?
Mayor, if I could, just procedurally before that, and I don't mean to cut off any board discussion, of course, but this would be two separate motion seconds and votes. You've got the amendment to the general zoning ordinance, which is Planning Commission Old Business Item 2 on the agenda. And then you have Planning Commission Old Business Item 3, which would be the amendment to the listed project text. And so those procedurally would be separate votes.
Two different items and take them separate.
Yes.
Any questions on item 2 as far as the conditional use permit requirements?
Mayor, I'll make a couple of comments. I know that this has generated a lot of interest on social media. I don't think we'll ever get to the point that we'll have these things far enough from a particular area, whether it's the 200-foot or the 1,000-foot. I don't think we'll ever get everybody satisfied. I think these are reasonable accommodations, especially the 1,000-foot away from where children are located. That was one of the things that was mentioned in one of the EPA reports that we were discussed with this, is that with the benzene issue, you try to keep it away from the children. A neighborhood necessarily doesn't have a lot of children in it in one particular area. I know in my neighborhood I've got pockets with children, some pockets with nothing but adults. But daycares, parks, schools, those have a heavy concentration of children. So we're trying to keep those at the recommended distance of 1,000 feet. The other one that's been mentioned a lot on social media is just to stop gas stations and convenience stores from coming in at all. That's not an option for us. We have to follow the law, and the law says we can't use regulations or zoning or anything else, moratoriums to stop all these convenience stores from coming in. We have to do this for safety reasons, is what this is intended for, is to do this for safety, whether it's crime, traffic, the benzene levels, whatever. This is dealing with safety, possible traffic issues. So this zoning is not meant to restrict them, but to give the city more control over where these go and make sure it's an appropriate place for them to go.
Yeah, well stated. It's just to protect the residents from the benzene and automobile traffic from pumps in the front. When crashes occur on a street or highway, normally it would occur close to the front of a C-store gas pumps, and if they're in the rear or the side, then that's going to be less opportunity for an explosion or fuel fire. So these are the reasons that the board's being asked to look at this. Motion to approve item 2, if I'm hearing right, Mr. Wallace, from Alderman Wallace. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Alderman Dickerson. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Now, the second part would be the hearing date, for consideration of this project text for these 17, I guess it is, C-stores that would basically give them deadlines throughout a 2-year process, whether to plat the land or get approval from the board, et cetera, but to be built out within 2 years, or they would come back before, they'd go before the Board of Zoning Adjustments for a conditional use permit and fall under these guidelines versus the guidelines today that they currently have. Is that a decent summary, Mr. Gamble?
Yes, sir, that's pretty much it. I mean, these are the 17 planned developments where the tables in the project text allow there to be C-stores with fuel pumps. So basically, we're changing it to make those all conditional uses, and that would make them subject to the regulations that we just adopted, the same as they are in C2.
Thank you. Any questions, board?
I know this particular ordinance that we did with the vesting is probably going to have people that have convenience stores in their different stages, that if they're serious about developing it, they're going to start moving forward on it. Because we talked about the one at Germantown and State Line Road there. There's been dirt work done in the last week on that location, where it hadn't had anything done in months and sometimes years before anything was done. But there's activity on that because it's going to fall in this vesting procedure. So
Yes, sir.
we may have more convenience stores pop up than normal, but because they've got this timeline of 2 years, they've got to get it done. So that's the negative side of this. But otherwise, we're going to do the conditional use permit, and some of these may never go in. So
That's correct.
it's a trade-off there.
Yes, sir.
So that's an example, Alderman Dickerson. You can see this is Plantation, this is Germantown Road and State Line. So that whole area in Plantation, that is about 60 acres that you could do right now outright convenience stores anywhere on that 60 acres. So by making this change, you know, that would only be allowed under conditional use permit. So if that C-store that you're talking about right on the corner doesn't proceed forward, if he does not meet those vesting provisions, then what would happen is that would be required to get a conditional use permit, and that site would actually be ineligible to get that, because you have 2 C-stores on the Tennessee side, so you've got 2 of the 4 quadrants of the intersection already done. So that's a good example of I think, you know, what the reasons are behind this whole ordinance. So if he does not move forward on that and meet those provisions, then in all likelihood that would probably never become a C-store.
Thank you. Any other comments or any motions? Motion to approve by Mr. Dickerson on item 3.
You may want to ask for the second and then just procedurally ask if there's any comment on this, since it is a different item in the problem.
Thank you. We've got a motion from Mr. Dickerson. Is there a second? Second, Mr. Wallace. Public, I failed to ask for public comments on this particular item, on these 17. If there's any comments that need to be made, please come forward. If you'd like to make any comments for or against this ordinance.
Good evening. My name's Brian Garchor, and I live at 7900 Jones Cove, of course, Olive Branch. And it's just a question for clarification, and I'll use the example of a partially built gas station and at Church in 305, and it's been in phases. If they do not comply, and it does have fuel pumps, if it does not comply with what's been passed here tonight, will like the canopy have to be removed, or you know, is there some alteration to the appearance of the store? I'm just kind of curious about
We
that.
normally take input instead of questions, but that's a question that I think was already possibly touched on by Mr. Gambone. That's one of the 17, so they've got a 2-year period to finish that. And if they don't, then they've got to come back and start over under these new guidelines.
Understood.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and if they, I guess my question is if they fail to comply, and they abandon the project, so to speak, or continue to fail to comply, what's the consequence?
I don't think they'll have to abandon the project. If they don't finish this in the 2-year vesting procedure, they'll have to come back and say, we want to do this as conditional use, and we'd have to approve it as conditional use. And as far developed as that would, we probably wouldn't approve that.
You would approve it just
Yeah, because it's already mostly
existing, and
developed,
just
right.
they'd have to have they'd lose that opportunity.
Yeah, it just makes it a conditional use that they would have to, just another step they would have to go through to get there, to finish it.
Gotcha.
And part of our internal controls that were mentioned would be higher permit fees when someone comes back, if they don't finish that project on time, to raise the permit fees to drive them to go ahead and get it finished. We'd rather it be finished than just sit there, but we need some pain points in sometimes to make the developers finish some of those things on time.
Appreciate you indulging.
Yes, sir. Any
So-
additional public input?
Mayor, I would just ask, Alderman Dickerson, following public input, is it still your motion to approve? Yeah. And still?
We'll go ahead and close public input. If that's still your motion, Mr. Dickerson, and your second, Mr. Wallace. Any discussion by the board? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Consent items, board, you see those before you, item A and B. On the consent item, basically, you see that summary. Public hearing date on item 1, I think it was originally listed as November the 19th, 2024, but that is to set a hearing date for January the 21st, 2025. That may have been on the corrected agenda, but, okay. If no questions on that, any motions to approve the 2 consent agenda items? Mr. Wallace, motion, is there a second? Correction, Mr. Collins' motion, is there a second? Mr. Wallace, second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Item 2, consideration of application for a final plat for McMillan Place subdivision submitted by Bob Farley, Farley Surveying, on behalf of property owner Connie McMillan. The request is to create a single residential lot of 4.14 plus or minus acres. The subject property is zoned AR, Agricultural Residential District, and is located on the west side of Bridgeforth Road, approximately 1,300 feet north of the dead end of Bridgeforth Road. Staff report, please.
Just a few brief comments on this, Mayor. The parent parcel of this property is about 10.5 acres in size, and rather than describing it from the end of Bridgeforth Road, it's about 2 miles to the south of where Bridgeforth Road intersects with Pleasant Hill Road. And this is a family subdivision to basically cut a 4.14 acre property for a lot off of this 10.5 acre parent parcel. As it stands right now, there's no type of water, sewer, or even gas utilities down there. There's a plan to extend those as part of our annexation. This is property that was annexed in 2021, but assuming that they would develop before such time that those utilities were available, they could develop without them with proper approvals from the health department. And that's basically what's reflected in the conditions of approval. Our planning commission did review this at their December 10th meeting, and by unanimous 6-0 margin did recommend approval of this subject to the conditions as noted. And number 5 is dealing with the utility issue I mentioned, and I'll mention number 4 also, stating that the driveway on the future lot would need to be paved. And that concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Gambone. Any questions from the board?
This utilities will be on the old fashioned utilities,
I don't know what their plan would be. If the city services were available, they would need to tap into them, but I don't know. That would depend on the timing of whether they're going to build a home there before those are available or after.
Any other questions? Does the applicant, if the applicant's here, anything else to add to this? Okay. Any questions or motions from the board? Wallace, motion to approve. Second, Aldridge. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Following the agenda, old business, consideration of bids opened on December the 2nd, 2024 for the Craft Road raw water wells. It was tabled to this meeting back on December the 3rd. You have those, that bid in your packet, I do believe, board, I certainly do. Any questions on it? Motion to approve by Dickerson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Earhart. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Item 2, consideration of bid received during reverse auction held on December the 9th, 2024 for an emergency medical vehicle, which is an ambulance. Online reverse auction bid was held, and you see the recommended bidder, the only bidder, based on the auction results. Motion to approve by Wallace. Is there a second? Second, Henderson. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Consideration of bids open on December the 9th for the South Apron Rehabilitation Project at our airport. See, that bid came in at $415,875 is the recommended bid of the 3 bids received, and the lowest of the 3 bids received. Collins' motion. Is there a second? Second, Henderson. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Following the agenda under new business, consideration of recommendation to approve a professional service contract with Jones Davis Engineering in the amount not to exceed $60,000 for the project referred to as the newly annexed area water and sewer easement acquisition for South Area Project 3. That is in your packet as well. Mr. Swims, anything to add?
This is just a continuation of the work that Robbie Jones is doing to help acquire easements for our water and sewer project. So this is a much-needed project, and I will add that he's doing an excellent job, sometimes night and weekend work to do the work. So we recommend that we move forward with this. It's a not-to-exceed contract, so
Okay.
we'll be billed hourly.
Thank you. Mr. Collins, was that the motion? Yes. Motion from Collins. Is there a second? Dickerson, second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Consideration of recommendation to apply for a funding opportunity through MPO Metropolitan Planning Organization to resurface Craft Road from Goodman Road, Highway 302 to Church Road.
This is just to make the board aware that we were trying to apply through the MPO to get assistance with overlay funding for Craft Road from Church Road to Goodman Road. We're going to push toward getting, if we do get awarded this work for to be done in 2026, this is not a commitment from the board at this point, just to make y'all aware that we're applying to see if we can get awarded this, and if we do, we'll bring it back at that time. But there will be an 80-20 match on this.
80-20 match at approximately 1.9 million.
Yes, sir. And at that rate, if our estimate is right, it would be $380,700 would be the local match.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace, motion to approve. Is there a second? Second, Ms. Aldridge. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item 3, consideration of recommendation to approve purchase order for printing and mailing voter registration cards so that residents will have their voter card for the voter precincts, the wards that will come up in 2025 next year. Collins motion. Is there a second? Second, Dickerson. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item 4, consideration of recommendation for an annual payment to the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers as relates to the public performance of music in various municipal settings such as parades, holiday events, community festivals, inaugurations, and dignitary visits. Is there a motion to approve that annual payment?
So moved.
Earhart motion, second Collins. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to leave regular session with the intentions of going into executive session in order to discuss items 1 through 9 in executive session? Henderson motion, second. Wallace, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel matter in the administration department, personnel matter in the animal control department, personnel matter in the gas billing department, personnel matters in the fire department, personnel matters in the police department, personnel matter in the sanitation department, personnel matters in the street department, personnel matter in the water maintenance department, and acquisition of property discussion with city attorney related to South Area Project 2. Is there a motion to go into executive session to discuss those 9 items?
So moved.
Earhart motion. Is there a second? Second Henderson. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. We are in executive session.